Hey there, welcome back. Friends, today we will discuss about join. In order to understand the concept, let us first of all create a very simple and easy to understand program. So for this, first of all, we will create a public variable, public, and the variable would be a int variable. The name of the variable could be like counter, and we will initialize this with 0. Pretty standard stuff, right? Now inside the main method, we would be creating a thread. Before that, let us create an object of app type. Alright, and now we would be creating a thread. Alright, and inside pair of parentheses we will require new runnable instance. Alright, and let us also start the thread real quick. Alright, now inside this run method we will be adding a for loop for int I equals 0, I is less than equals to 1000, I plus plus, pretty standard stuff, right? And inside this for loop we will increase the value of counter, right? Right, and finally we will print the value of counter. The value, oops, this needs to be a string, the value of counter, and we will print the value of counter, app.counter. Alright, let me format this a little, and now if I execute the program, the value of counter is 0, but somehow the impact of this for loop is nothing and we won't be able to display the value of counter. Now friends, as we already know, the reason why we are getting this output, because this thread is executing after printing this line of code, right? Now this line of code where we are printing the value of counter is part of the main thread, and we are increasing the value of the counter in our thread 1. Now thread 1 and the main thread are executing simultaneously. As a result, before this for loop we are simply printing the value of counter, which isn't good. Now what is the solution of it? Definitely we can like sleep the main thread for some seconds and then try to check what is the value of counter. That can work, and the solution is thread.sleep, and we can like sleep the main thread for maybe 200 milliseconds. We need to also surround this with try catch, and then definitely we would be able to see the output, and the value would be, the counter value is 1001. The reason is because we are making use of I is less than equal to 1000. Let me fix this issue, and now the value of I will be 1000, which is cool, but this solution isn't that great. We are making use of sleep, but this is not that efficient. It might happen that the iteration may take less than 2000 milliseconds, maybe 500 milliseconds. We will get a proper output, and imagine when we were making use of 2000 milliseconds, we were wasting some time, right? So what is the efficient way how we can make sure that we will get best out of it, we will get a proper result of the counter, and we can synchronize these two threads to execute one by one? The solution is join. Let me show you how we can do that. Let us get rid of this try catch block, and now we will type in thread1 dot join. Now join method also have couple of variation, couple of versions. We will talk about that in couple of minutes. As if now we will simply make a call to the join method, and the join method will throw an exception, so we need to handle the exception. Alright, so this is cool stuff. Now what is the impact of this join? Join method will join the current thread with the thread with the reference. Little confusing. Now friends, thread1.join, this call to join method is part of your main thread. As a result, the main thread and thread1 will join. Now reference are very important. Join method is derived by the reference of the thread. So reference is thread1, the position is main thread. As a result, thread1 and join method will join. Now friends, what would be the impact of this thread1? The impact would be pretty simple. The main thread will wait until thread1 completes its execution. Let me show you the impact. Now whenever we execute the program will execute properly, and the output will be constant, which is 1000 in our case. So every time we will get a proper output. Why? Because Now main thread and thread 1 are not executing simultaneously, rather the main thread will wait until the execution of thread 1 completes. Alright, so this is cool, right? So this is the overall impact of the join method. Now not only main thread, rather any other thread can also call in the join method. Let us check how this is done. Alright, so now let me get rid of this try catch block once again, and now let's do one thing. Let's copy this part of code and paste it once again. With some slight modification, we will make this as thread 2, and everything seems to be good enough. Let's start thread 2 as well. Thread 2 dot start. Alright, and now if I execute the program, let's see what should be the output. Here we go. This is giving the output as 1000. Alright, now the reason why we are getting the output as 1000 is pretty cool. In here, we are simply running thread 1 and then thread 2. So we are getting some small amount of time before executing this particular line of code. Let me do one more thing. Let me cut this line of code and let me start these two threads with one another. Now we should get a output as the value of counter as 0, because now there is no difference between this line of code execution and starting of these two threads. So here is the output, which is cool. Now for example, we want to join these two threads and then we need to join both the threads with the main thread. Little confusing, right? How we can intercommunicate and how we can make sure that first thread 1 will work, then thread 2 will work, so that we can get a exact result of 2000. Then main thread should wait for both the threads. So little confusing scenario, but we will achieve this. So firstly, let us do one thing in order to show you the impact of join later. Let me call in the sleep method real quick, thread.sleep, and we will wait for like 2000 milliseconds. Let me surround this with try catch. Alright, now friends, as these two threads will simultaneously increase the value of counter, we will get some inconsistencies in our output. Here we go. So there would be some inconsistencies, right? So first of all, let me do one thing. Let me join thread 1 and thread 2, so that if we execute this program multiple times, then we will not get any kind of inconsistency, right? So let's do that. Alright, so in here the thread 1 will start first and then thread 2 will start. So we will join thread 2 with thread 1, and the way is pretty simple. Inside the run method, we will type in thread 1 dot join. Now friends, what would be the impact of this thread 1 dot join? Thread 2 will wait until thread 1 completes its execution. Pretty simple, right? So thread 2 will wait. Moreover, if we try to call in thread 2.join inside thread 1, we won't be able to do that as well. Why? Because when we have declared this thread 1, thread 2 haven't declared yet. It is declared first, and the mechanism of threading is handled differently, right? So whenever we create a thread is maintained in thread pool, and it is not like variables. So as a result, we won't be able to make use of thread 2.join in thread 1. Rather, the solution is make use of join method in thread 2. Now friends, if I execute the program, we will get a proper result every time, and there won't be any inconsistency, and we will get the output as 2000. The value of counter will be increased properly using these two for loops. Now the solution of this sleep method, how we can join these two threads with the main method. Let's do that. Now again, let me get rid of this try catch block. Now understand this. Thread 2 will wait for thread 1. Now there is no requirement to wait for thread 1. Rather, if I type in thread 2 dot join, even this will work, right? So even this will work. Let me add in the try catch block. Why? Because the thread 2 already have join on thread 1, and in main method we are simply joining thread 2. So thread 2 will wait for thread 1 and main thread will wait for thread 2. So a synchronized process. Let me execute the program and again we will get a proper result. Let me repeat the sequence once again. Thread 2 will wait for thread 1 and main thread will wait for thread 2. As a result, we are waiting for firstly thread 1 completion, then thread 2 completion, and finally the main thread completion. Getting my point? Now friends, we have multiple versions of join. Let me show you. In here there are in total 3 versions. Now friends, in here we can either make use of join method where there is no parameter. This means that we will wait for thread 1 to complete execution. Now the second version is where we pass on some time boundary. The third version is very precise where we pass on the time boundary in milliseconds and nanoseconds, right? So there are 3 versions. For example, we pass on 2000 milliseconds. This is the timeout value. Now if the thread 1 require more than 2000 milliseconds to complete, then the lock would be released in 2 seconds itself. So this is the timeout value. As of now, as we know that the thread 1 will not require more than 2000 milliseconds, there won't be any impact of this change. If I execute the program multiple times, there won't be any impact. But for example, if I do this thing inside the run method, if I call in the sleep method, for example, if I type in thread.sleep and we make the thread 1 to sleep for 500 milliseconds, then this means that the time required for thread 1 to complete is way more than 2000 milliseconds. Let me show you the impact. The output would be changed quite a bit. The thread 1 has no impact now. The reason is pretty simple. We are making use of the join and we are passing in the timeout value. As soon as 2000 millisecond has passed, this line of code will release the lock. As a result, the impact of join would be nothing and we are getting some false output. So this is the impact of the different version of join. So I guess I have made myself clear. Let me fix the issue. Now finally, let me also show you if I make use of thread1.join plus thread2.join, the impact would be nothing because we already have the join on thread 2 for thread 1. So there won't be any impact and the output would be same. So this line of code is optional. You can apply the join on thread 1, but that's not required. Alright, so this is all about today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Do practice, do try to research more on joins and all these concepts. Thanks for watching and take care.